Giants president of baseball operations Farhan Zaidi has been no stranger to criticism during his tenure as president of baseball operations. And Bob Melvin this season has kind of joined him, especially lately, getting a lot of heat for the way the Giants have played. Is it fair? What are the criticisms? Do they make sense? All of that next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show for over 5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And coming up on today's show, it is going to be a mailbag edition of the show. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions on Twitter/X. Apologies for not getting an episode out yesterday. Something unforeseen came up, wasn't able to do it, and we're getting one out today. So I said Monday through Friday, but if we miss one, we try to make it up on Saturday if possible, and that's what we're doing here. So the first round of questions, there's 1, 2, 3 different questions about Bob Melvin, really. And the first one is from Jody Baseball, who says, can you break down what the complaints are with Bob Melvin's managerial style, and what does he do well? How long did it take for Boch to acclimate, and does Melvin have a leash like that? And then MJ says, how much of this season is on Bob Melvin? The Padres have a worse roster this year and are fighting for a title without him. And then Ryan says, with many people calling for Farhan and Melvin to be replaced, who is so much different that they would change the direction of the results? So 3 different questions, similar but little different angles there. I think the first question is important. Can you break down what the complaints are with Melvin's managerial style? Because if you've been online at all, like on X or Twitter or YouTube or whatever, and you've seen criticisms of Bob Melvin, you may be wondering, like, are they legit? And I mean, because for me in other sports, I don't follow them or understand them nearly as well as I do with baseball, and I'm never sure who's right and who's wrong and all this. And so I'm going to give my opinion on what I've seen out of Bob Melvin in his first year as manager of the Giants. And so recently, I think a lot of the criticism has been about, there was the handling of young players like Marco Luciano, who basically just sat on the bench after they traded Jorge Soler. They kind of made it seem like Marco Luciano was going to get a shot to play a lot without Soler, and then they didn't use him at all, and then they just recently sent him back down to the minors. And so Farhan Zaidi, president of baseball operations, has been very clear over the years that, as much as people like to say he makes the lineups and all this, he doesn't. He's very clear, and the managers he's had, Kapler and Melvin, very clear that lineup decisions are the managers to make, and that they make those decisions. And so that does, to me, I'm sure they have conversations, but ultimately it falls under the domain of Bob Melvin to decide who is in the lineup and who's not. And so anyway, that's one thing, is a young player like Luciano not playing. And then another thing would be a couple of decisions that came up in this Braves series where they bunted with Tyler Fitzgerald. And so this is funny because I think there's a whole school of people out there who believe that you should be bunting more in those types of situations that Fitzgerald bunted in, which is, just generally bunting more is something that some people want to see. And then also there's a whole other school of thought, which is that you should almost never bunt, especially sacrifice bunts, because you're giving away an out, and outs are like the most precious thing you have, and don't give them away. And so Fitzgerald, though, has been like the Giants' best hitter for months now, and just hitting homers, and the Giants were down a run, and he represented the winning run in that game, and the bunt was called by Bob Melvin. So basically sacrificing your best hitter, like giving the Braves an out, trying to, in order to move the runner up to third with one out, and then you're hoping for a sacrifice fly, which they hadn't been able to do well in recently at all. So I understood that one. We broke that one down at the time that it happened. And then I had a separate criticism that I didn't really hear mentioned much, but the fact that Ryan Walker didn't appear in that game. It would have just been 2 days in a row pitching. It's not like it would have been 3 days in a row. They used Randy Rodriguez in the top of the 10th, and that's when the Braves scored that one run that was enough. The free run, the free runner scored, but Ryan Walker didn't pitch the 9th in a tie game, and he didn't pitch the 10th in a tie game. And so I didn't understand not using him in that game, because this series was so huge. And so it's, I guess, stuff like that. But then where I'm going to come in and interject is that I think that Melvin has actually done a good job. And so how much of this season is on Bob Melvin? I think in baseball, it's just not a good kind of way to look at things when we look at, like, this season, the Padres are doing well, and last season they didn't do well. Like, baseball is so weird in that last year was like a freak season for the Padres. If you look at their record in one-run games, if you look at their record in extra inning games, like, that explains their season, basically. I'm going to tell you right now, in one-run games, they were 9-23, and in extra innings, they were 2-12. Okay, and so this season, I'm positive that those numbers are going to look a lot better for them. They're 7-1 in extra innings. Get that? They were, what did I say? 2-13, 2-12, and now this year they're 7-1. And in one-run games this year, they're 17-13. And you might say, well, Bob Melvin, the difference is Bob Melvin. Well, the Giants, though, are like right in the middle. And so the poor results that the Padres had last year didn't carry over to the Giants this year. Giants are 18-18 in one-run games. And so it kind of underscores the point that kind of one-run games are like kind of a toss-up, right? And that it's just kind of random. And sometimes you're going to do really poorly in a given year in one-run games. Sometimes you're going to do really well, and sometimes you're going to be right in the middle. And it's just one of those things. And the Giants are 6-7 in extra innings, and they were 6-5, and then they just lost 2 straight. But the Padres 7-1. The Diamondbacks are having a great season, but they're 4-7 in extra inning games. The Dodgers are a great team, but they're like basically 500 in one-run games. They're 16-15. And so even the Rockies are 21-18 in one-run games and 7-4 in extra innings. So it's just, it doesn't really explain much. And also, let's not forget that in 2022, the Padres went to the NLCS for the first time in a million years, and they won 89 games under Bob Melvin in his first year there. And their record in one-run games was 30-17, and they were 12-5 in extra innings. And so 100%, you can't look at last year's Padres and say that, I mean, because that's really what explained their bad season, like 2-12 in extra innings. Like if you're just 7-7, that's 5 extra wins, and then they were whatever, way under 500 in one-run games. And if you just make that 500, then you add on some more wins, and then they're probably in the playoffs. And so I think it has less to do with Melvin and more to do with randomness that is baseball. And I think he's done a good job in San Francisco in the sense that there's a blend of kind of understanding the modern game, but also understanding the feel of baseball and of personalities and human beings that are playing this game. So maybe I'm in the minority, maybe I'm not, I don't know, but I think he's done a pretty good job. So we'll continue. Well, I'll wrap up my thoughts on that, and also we'll get to questions about Farhan Zaidi, Patrick Bailey versus Joey Bart, who's doing well in Pittsburgh, and much more. So all of that coming up in just a minute. And before we get into it, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Liquid IV. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, because baseball and summer go together like Liquid IV and indulgent hydration. The benefits are numerous, like staying hydrated while traveling, while going to summer festivals, or after a night out. Blast off with the iconic summer flavor of Popsicle Firecracker. I just got mine. It's sitting in my kitchen. I'll probably have one later today. A festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon lime, tart cherry, and raspberry flavors. My mouth is watering. And you can find all your favorite flavors on their website, from acai berry and lemon lime to pina colada. Tear, pour, live more. 1 stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. All right, as promised, we are going to get to more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers on Monday, we'll be breaking down this 2-game series in Oakland. And for your second listen today, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And a reminder that you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. So just to wrap that up, I just feel like the team has had more of a personality this season under Bob Melvin. And there's going to be a question when we get to criticisms and compliments of Farhan Zaidi, which I received both in this mailbag, question batch. First of all, they have played hard. They have played consistently hard. And they've had breakthroughs from young players. And I think that some of that is a credit to Melvin and his staff. And Melvin's they kind of let Luciano rot on the bench, but also the breakthroughs of a Tyler Fitzgerald and a Elliot Ramos also had to do with Melvin kind of pushing for them to not be platooned. Like, he just didn't platoon them. He just stuck them out there and just kept with them when they were performing. And with Luciano, there's possible other explanations to give, which is maybe that, because obviously he's going to collaborate with Farhan Zaidi, and maybe if they don't really believe in the bat, or maybe they don't believe in the defense, and they, wanted to give a look to Encarnacion, which they did, and then he was doing well. I don't know. I didn't love the bunt by Fitzgerald, but I explained on the show when he did after that game that I understood it. Fitzgerald is really fast. He has a tendency to strike out. Lamonte Jr. was on deck. Like, all of the context matters. I think Melvin has done a pretty good job. And so how much of this season is on Melvin? Not much. I don't know that the manager makes that much of an influence. And I think largely culturally, that's what a manager does. And I think culturally, this is the best we've seen, and the Giants will report that. We keep hearing players say this is like a special group, and they really have a close bond with each other. And I think that that is a credit to Melvin, and kind of something that was lacking under Kapler, and why he got fired ultimately was some of the comments at the end of the season, that it was like a every man for himself mentality in the clubhouse, and they were just kind of playing selfishly and not really cohesive. And that kind of speaks to not having a strong leader at the top in the clubhouse. And I think Melvin is that. And so for me, I think I don't really have many complaints. It's not like he's sacrificed bunting every day, which I wouldn't like. You know, the sacrifice bunt is generally not a good play. It decreases your chances of, it may increase your chances sometimes of scoring more, or one run, excuse me, but it decreases your chances of like overall run expectancy in an inning, because you're giving away an out. And so you might get one run more often, but you're getting multiple runs less often. Anyway, that's kind of getting in the weeds there. We're going to move on and say, the question about who is so different that would change the direction and results. It's a fair question, and we'll answer it as we talk about Farhan Zaidi. So Smart Sports says, seriously, how long is Farhan being given? 6 years, 7 seasons, and almost no results. I don't know any other GM given this much leeway, especially not of a big market club. And then on the flip side, James says, why does everyone seem to forget about the amazing prospect development that has happened under Farhan and only focus on the missteps? Not a huge fan of Farhan, but we have some pretty solid homegrown players now under his regime. And so, seriously, how long is Farhan being given? The thing is, like, going into this season, it wasn't at all off base to say that this roster looked like a playoff caliber roster. And so the fact that their record is exactly 500, it obviously doesn't reflect well on the president of baseball operations. They're just 500. They've been middling around 500 for years. They had the one outlier 107 win season, which is insane. But, they're 62 and 62. And so, the playoffs, they're 3 back. The Braves lost yesterday, which was nice, by the way. So they're 3 back in the standings, for the 3rd wild card spot, which it'd be nice if you were playing for more than just the 3rd wild card spot, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I mean, in 2019, a little bit under 500. In 2020, shortened season, 1 win away from 500. In 2021, the outlier 107 win season. In 2022, exactly 500. In 2023, a little bit under 500. And in 2024, 500 right now. And so I get the frustration 100%. And the question is, seriously, how long is Farhan being given? I mean, I don't know what exactly that means. Like, how much longer will he be given? Is that the question? But this year, this looked like a playoff caliber roster. And not only that, it looked like that before we knew about the breakouts that were going to happen from guys like Tyler Fitzgerald and Elliot Ramos, specifically those two. And so it's just not worked out. It just hasn't translated to the wins in the way that it kind of was expected to, both by just pundits and also by projection systems. The Giants were projected to be a pretty solid contender. And I repeatedly beat this drum that their pitching just hasn't performed up to par. And a lot of it looks a little bit fluky. Like, they have a 4.25 ERA as a pitching staff, which ranks 21st in baseball. I mean, there's your issue right there. You're in the bottom 3rd in earned run average, and you play in a pitcher-friendly park. And so I just think, like, you have to, like, the baseball is so weird that, and also the season's not over. Like, let this season play out, and then we'll kind of evaluate this season. The Giants have been hot. I know they just lost 3 out of 4, but they've also won like 14 out of their last 20. And so if they play the A's and then they play the White Sox, so they could keep this thing kind of rolling here and make some noise, and we'll see. But I get the frustration. I understand, like, just you to be perpetually around 500 is super frustrating. But it's also like they're not bad. They've just been maddeningly mediocre in terms of results. But it's kind of hard to explain. Like, this roster should be better, and ultimately, like, you should have to pay for that. Like, that is your responsibility as the president of baseball operations. But also, when it's like objectively you built a good roster, but it just like hasn't worked, at least in that particular season. And then if you look back, we have seen comments about 2022 and 2023, like literally from Farhan Zaidi, talking about the economic situation. So he's just defending the owners there. Like, he's saying basically we were like, even so he lies like publicly because he works for ownership, and ownership doesn't want to look bad. And so it's part of his job is to make ownership not look bad. And so he says there's no restrictions on spending and all that. But then he also went out and later kind of said we were coming off really difficult and uncertain economic situations and this and that and the other. And so the lack of kind of moves, like we saw this past offseason when they really splurged and made a bunch of signings and getting Blake Snell and Matt Chapman and Jorge Soler, although that hasn't really worked out. I mean, he got traded, obviously. But, the signings of Chapman and Snell were quite savvy and good deals. And then committing $113 million plus a posting fee to Jung-Hoo Lee. And Jordan Hicks signing. I mean, Jordan Hicks, when his arm was strong, looked like a really good pickup. And so they had a very busy, the trade of Robbie Ray, although Robbie Ray has struggled. It's still too early to kind of make a call on that one. But shedding Mitch Haniger and Anthony DeSclafani and getting Robbie Ray, I think, is a pretty strong move there. So I'm just trying to say that, like, and then also, like, the second part of the question in terms of why does everyone ignore the amazing prospect development that we've seen, and that's like Patrick Bailey. And there's going to be a question about him in just a minute, and it really depends on what website you're using to evaluate Patrick Bailey to notice the difference between a Bailey and a Bart. But Bailey is good, and Tyler Fitzgerald has had a ridiculously impressive breakout season. Elliot Ramos has had a very legit breakout season, and, under the radar kind of pickups like Tyro Estrada, who's had a down year but has otherwise been a strong contributor for the Giants for a few years now. They got him for nothing. Mike Yastrzemski, solid player, got him for nothing. The development of Logan Webb, like so when you bring somebody else in, though, start over, to have them start over and like change whole directions and philosophies, it just takes time. And so when you see the positive kind of building blocks and you see the offseason that they put together and the team strength coming into the year that everyone perceived to be pretty good, that's why. Like, and that's what he's being evaluated on. In addition to just, yes, wins and losses ultimately are the bottom line, but they had a roster people thought was playoff caliber coming into the year. Plus, they've had breakout young player performances, and we're starting to see the fruits of their own drafting under this regime. And it's taken this long to see it. And so if you bring someone else in, it would take that long again to kind of see the fruits of their drafting. And so I don't know. That's what I agree with the last question that was part of the first question, which was, who is so much different that they would change the direction of the results? Like, I'm kind of in the same boat in that I don't know. And I think that, like, Fitzgerald, like, they drafted this guy and what he's doing, and Bailey, they drafted this guy and what he's doing. And it's like, they just got to get over the hump. And it seems like they're close to me. They just are like underperforming a little bit. So anyway, more questions and answers, Bailey versus Bart and more in just a minute and before we get into it. Today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week, from lowering select players' stats projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. And Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California. Today, I am playing on Prize Picks, and I'm taking more than half a walk for Lamont Wade Jr. facing a right-handed pitcher. Osvaldo Bido for the A's. Hadn't heard of him even. And I'm taking more than 3.5 strikeouts for Osvaldo Bido. If you're on YouTube, you can see this. And this is a 2 picks to pay $50 with $25 power play. So 2 times money back if you successfully hit on those. And so that's for me what I'm going with. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code all lowercase locked on MLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's all lowercase code locked on MLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, as promised, we're going to get into Patrick Bailey versus Joey Bart and a little bit more. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Again, apologies about yesterday, but hopefully you're able to, catch this one this weekend, and then we'll be back every dayers on Monday breaking down this really important 2-game series. I mean, every game is important. The Giants have played, what did I say? They're 62-62, so a lot of the season is done. That's 124 games, so there's only 38 remaining. Is that right? 62 plus 62 minus 162. 38 games. That's unbelievable. 38 games remaining. So, wow, we're like coming down the stretch run here. They gotta get hot, and they gotta get hot now. Is what it comes down to. So anyway, the next question is from Corey or Kevin. And we'll also add in Corey's question. But Kevin says, Bailey is obviously a better defensive catcher than Joey Bart. But did the Giants deal the better player? If you go by WAR, Bart is at 1.9 while Bailey is at 1.6, and that's with 150 fewer at-bats. And then Corey says, I'd just like to know what's wrong with Bailey's offense. And so this is where it becomes very important to note that WAR is not just like a counting stat like home runs. It is a formulaic metric. It is something that different websites have different formulas for, and you're definitely not looking at Fangraphs with those numbers. You're looking at Baseball Reference, and for catchers, in my opinion, my understanding is that Baseball Reference just doesn't do a good job of integrating catcher defense into its WAR calculations. And so on Fangraphs, you mentioned Bailey's WAR, I'm guessing on Baseball Reference, is at 1.6 on Baseball Reference. And on Fangraphs, it's at 3.8, so significantly more than twice as high as the number you cited. And again, Fangraphs is known to be superior at integrating catcher defense into its WAR calculation. And so Fangraphs is the place to go for catcher WAR. And again, Bailey at 3.8, making him the up there with Matt Chapman as one of the best players on the Giants this year. About 2 is an average season from an average player to WAR, and Bailey's at about 4 in 94 games. And so that's how much of an impact Bailey makes, even when he's been below average offensively. He's very much fallen off offensively. He was having a strong offensive season, but he's in a hellacious slump, as they say. But defensively, like a young Yadier Molina, like it's a fair comp, in my opinion. I said it last year. I'm saying it again this year. He's put together in his first 191 games 6.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement. And Joey Bart has played 216 games and put up 1.8 Fangraphs wins above replacement. 1.8 for Bart in about a little less than 700 plate appearances. 6.4 for Bailey in about 700 plate appearances. So they've played about the same amount in terms of plate appearances. And Bailey's been like almost 5 wins better per Fangraphs. And so this season for Bart, 54 games, 1.3 Fangraphs wins above replacement. 54 games. And for Bailey, 94 games, 3.8. So it's just not even close when you look at Fangraphs. It's definitely worth pointing out. Even today, Bart is playing right now, or the game's already over. 2 for 4, or at least 4 plate appearances with 2 doubles. And he's hitting 278 with a 353 on base and 521 slugging. So Bart has done a really good job offensively, and that's definitely worth noting. I don't know exactly what to make of that. I think it's a small sample, and I want to see more, 190 plate appearances, but he's having by far the best season of his career offensively in Pittsburgh. But no, I don't think the Giants dealt the better player. Bailey's defense is that much better that it's dramatically, he's a dramatically more valuable player than Joey Bart because of his defense. Even like, and in their careers, by the way, yeah, Bart has actually been a better offensive player in his career. It's kind of, I wouldn't have guessed that, but this season has been good enough for Bart that it pushes him to a superior level. But at the same time, the strikeouts and the swing and miss, like in certain situations, that's just a killer. Whereas Bailey at least can kind of make contact in key situations where you need contact. And Bart, there were times when he was just swinging and missing like at everything. So last question, Outer Sunset Giants says, should the Giants claim Amed Rosario? And as soon as Amed Rosario was DFA'd by the Dodgers, he jumped out to me as someone that they possibly should claim. Now, I dug into him a little bit at the time, and so I can tell you that, what the issue is with Rosario is that he's not good defensively anywhere, but he can really hit left-handed pitching. He was a former top prospect, and he, I believe, is still fast. I don't know if he's kind of slowed down, but yeah, so he's a flawed player for sure, but he's 28 years old. He is not a good defender, but most importantly to me, he can hit left-handed pitching. So the Giants have had, his sprint speed is 93rd percentile. And he's always been extremely fast. And so a guy who's really fast and a guy who can hit left-handed pitching, you look at the bench right now, and Casey Schmidt and Gerard Encarnacion can't be optioned. Schmidt can. And would it upgrade the Giants to have Amed Rosario down the stretch as opposed to Casey Schmidt, with Schmidt having the ability to be optioned? It just might. I mean, Schmidt provides that defense, but Rosario would provide impact running and can be in the lineup and hit against left-handed pitching. So I think it would be worth a claim for sure. Although if their 40-man is full, they would have to like DFA somebody, but I'm not sure it's full. It looks like it is full, and I'm sure there's somebody somewhere who could be DFA'd or possibly a 60-day IL candidate. So I think that Amed Rosario would, as much as I like Casey Schmidt, I think if you're really just trying to win every game here, claim him. If you fall out of contention, DFA him and call Schmidt back up just to let your own young players play. But in the meantime, I think it's an upgrade over Schmidt probably, because Rosario is more of a known commodity, whereas Schmidt, although he has done kind of well at times and hit some big homers and the defense has been impressive, Rosario is pretty solid, is a pretty solid player. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday, A's versus Giants, critical 2-game series. Can the Giants do better than splitting and certainly losing both? I think winning both would go a long way. So we'll be breaking that down on Monday. And thank you for making us your first listen. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.